Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to show you, this is a part 2 video. This is how I painted these wargaming hills. If you're interested in the sculpting part, check out part 1 on my channel, the sculpting cheap wargaming hills out of cheap materials, styrofoam, sawdust, etc. Alright, first off I'm going to hit all of my rocks with a base coat of a German gray. Okay, so one way that I can start putting down some tone is I can use pan pastels to mix with the paints on the surface, and it's also gonna kind of dull down that finish, take some of the gloss out of it. So I'm kind of dry brushing, but at the same time I'm actually kind of mixing the pigments with the paint at the same time, and it does look like you know, it picks up a lot of the stone texture. It looks pretty good, I think. And I like how it kind of dulls down some of the glossiness of the acrylic. I'm going to hit them later with some dull coat lacquer, but it looks good to this is like a nice, you know, dry brush layer, and it's easy. I'm just going to mix it with the paint on the surface. I do love how these guys look painted up, the bark, but I don't know how permanent it is. Like, I don't know if they're gonna last. But it's already looking like stone. That's a nice base layer. And it's, you know, it's pretty easy to just kind of mix some colors on the surface of these pieces. With this guy, I had some areas where, you know, the plaster was kind of like flat, you know, and it showed. So I went ahead and painted around to make the rocks look, because, you know, like with areas like this, you could turn this into rock. Like you could sort of make these cleaves, some of them into, you know, rocks, or they could be dirt. So I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to kind of pick some areas to kind of break that up so that they don't look flat, like I just glued them onto the side of this piece of styrofoam. And then the like areas down here, whoops, where this was styrofoam, you know, that's next to the plaster. You can't really tell. But like this chunk right here, I'm gonna make that into rock, so that cleave doesn't show that looks like plaster. So that's what the rocks look like with the dry brush of the pigments. I had a little bit of spillage over here with my German gray. I'm just going to cover that up with some flock or something. But I feel like that looks really, really good. Like the rocks just kind of scream to be like dry brushed, you know? It's like yeah. And also, so if you wanted to try this, if you wanted to experiment with dry brushing with pigments, I found these at Hobby Lobby the other day. And this is like a Tamiya weathering kit. You could easily get through like a bunch of stuff like this with one of these little kind of makeup compact things. And then this was only a few bucks. And Hobby Lobby, they always have 40% off coupons, and you can use that on something like this if you wanted to experiment with this, but not go to your art supply place and buy, big tins of pan pigments, pan pastels. But yeah, I feel like it just, it goes on really, really easily. You can use it. You can put it on some like slightly tacky paint and then kind of mix it in, and use it to kind of make some highlights and some some shadows, kind of force some perspective on your terrain. But I think it really dulls down the natural glossiness of the the acrylic paint, and then it just makes like a really nice looking, kind of realistic looking rock face to begin with. And then what you can do is you can color on top of that with glazes, and you can, so I hit it here and I knocked off, did it again, hit it there and knocked off a little bit of the paint, so I can just go back over that, being careful not to do it again. And then like this paint isn't really tacky anymore. I'm just going to go over it with another coat. And then I'm going to go ahead and mix some pigments on it, on the face, to get that nice shadow going on, and to pick up some of the rock texture. And I feel like the high contrast, like the black and the white, just looks really good. It makes all of those little details just kind of pop everywhere. And you can go in with the pigments and mix them with the paint as well, like that. And that looks good too, and it dries a little flatter that way as well. You can go in with some black, kind of mix that with some of these pigments over here, and then go back over it with some white to get those highlights, just like if you were wet blending. with you know, wet paint. It's just one of the ways that I like to dry brush on stuff like this, but I feel like it looks really good when you're done. I highly recommend it. Alright, so I've got these guys, that's how the dry brushed pigments look when they're dry. And then I'm going to take some of these, this is like a burnt sienna, I think. Yeah, pretty sure. Well, it doesn't even say on it. Looks like a burnt sienna. And then I'm just going to go around on the base to kind of give it more of a dirt kind of look to it. And then I can use a raw sienna on to make some more highlights on the rocks. And this stuff looks really cool. It looks like just dirt kind of settling. If you can see that there. It just looks really, really good. Kind of settling on top of the rocks. Yeah, that's what that looks like. Like some really nice, like cool looking slate kind of look. I've considered like getting that stuff for my house, but this is how that looks with the burnt sienna pigments just kind of rubbed around the base. And then I've got some, you know, I've got the white highlights, I've got the dark, the black, and I'm even I'll even go in and kind of like make some like sort of like stripes, you know, some striations with this stuff to make it look like natural kind of like shapes, you know, in the rock. But yeah, I think that looks really, really good. If you're looking for a realistic looking, you know, kind of rock, if you want to go like ultra realism, I mean, first of all, like you could call it done here. Like I can't think of a better way to do like a realistic looking kind of hill. This guy still looks a little bare up here. I think I might put some little like bushes or something up here, right? Because these are my trees, and then these are going to be down further. I think I'm going to have it so that the tree line is up here, you know, but have like some still like little shrubs and things that are growing down up there. Yeah, that's what that looks like with the pigments, and that's all dried pigments. So I'm really happy with that. So for the next part, actually I wanted to show this. So this is an actual rock, right? Next to these real rocks. This guy looks boring, but I was going to use this rock to base this guy, and then I used the same kind of technique to make this is foam core, so I used the same technique to make a base for this guy out of foam core, and I think it looks way better. Like it's way more interesting looking and has a lot more texture, and I mean, like the paint job, you know, sells it too. But anyways, so what I want to do now is, and you could stop right there, and that, you know, that'd be a great base. But what I want to do now is I'm going to keep building up the texture around the base. I'm going to use some like really fine sand first before I do flocking. So I have this really really fine grit kind of sand that I got from Hobby Lobby the other day, and it's a little bit light, like the color's a little bit light. It's not quite right for this, but we're gonna darken it up with an oil wash after. So I'm gonna try and cover up a few of my little boo-boos on the base, and you know, like sand would kind of collect, or you know, like rocks and things like that in a piece like this. It would collect at the bottom of these rocks. You know, it wouldn't be like all flock going all the way up. That would look kind of out of place. So I'm going to add some sand in a few little places down here on this guy, and like on top to kind of cover up some boo-boos, and like in this guy in between the rocks, like right here. But yeah, like so these are real rocks. This is the plaster, and actually you can see like here after the acrylic dried, you can see some of that little slightly glossiness, and then you can see how the pigments dull down that glossiness. So I'm going to use some clear Elmer's, and then I'm going to water it down just a little bit. Alright, so I went ahead and went around and did the sand thing on all these guys to... Actually, I like these guys so much that I don't really want to flock them. I want to make like a desert set now. And then I actually ended up doing it on this guy too. I noticed that I missed well, when I was pinning him, first of all, pinning him, I had to go through this claw and then put the pin through there, so it popped out on this side. So I ended up using it to kind of fix the fix that area, and then did it around the base too. But yeah, I love it. I think it looks awesome. How's that, Ross? So, and then but these guys, I think I'm gonna keep this one, and then I'm gonna keep this one as like desert kind of pieces. So the sand, I think, is, I also want to do like a Zen rock garden thing now too, but I'm gonna seal this. I'm gonna go over it. Just wanted to show kind of how so like there were some spots where I went in to kind of repair things, you know, and like so if the glue goes on kind of thick, you can take a little bit of water and then, well, actually So I'll sprinkle some sand on it first, like that, and you can see that it's a little bit thick right there. So you can just take a little bit of water and then kind of dab it, and it'll run all over like that. Like if you get it up onto the I don't know, like the sides of a piece or something, you can just take a little bit of water and dab it on there, and it'll run around and kind of fill in the cracks and stuff. Like with this spot, I'll show you right here. I'm just gonna go in there, dab a little bit of the sand on. And then use a little bit of water to kind of get it off of, get it off of the areas where I don't want it, like that. Or to kind of push it around. All right, and then yeah, I'm gonna seal these. Or I'm gonna hit them with some lacquer, and then I'm gonna go over these guys just like this with an oil wash to kind of bring everything together. And I'm gonna put sand around the rest of this guy, and then these guys, my hills with like trees and stuff, I just kind of went around some areas and then, you know, fix my boo-boos and stuff. And there's some areas where I want to kind of leave some dirt exposed, and then others where I don't, where I'm going to cover it with flock. So let's see which one of these is dry. This guy is dry, and then I went ahead and I hit some, like I put a little bit of ballast, and then, you know, like I wanted to throw a couple more little rocks in there, and then kind of mixed in so that it looks like some rocks kind of fell down into this little crevasse thing. I'm not sure how, I mean, I like it, but I'm not sure. But what I'm gonna do also is I'm gonna go ahead and hit some of the sand, because it really stands out with the pan pastels, to kind of dull down the I don't want those like extreme highlights. I want it to kind of blend in with the rest of the piece. So I'm going to use the same colors of the pan pastels and kind of dull down some of those unnatural highlights before I seal it, before I go over this guy with, you know, an oil wash too. And then I think I'm gonna add some little like shrubs, some kind of scrub stuff at the top of this guy. Like some little bushes. So I'm gonna make some using either like some floral wire or like just some twine or something to kind of make some little armatures and glue some turf, some foliage stuff to that on top. Alright, I'm gonna go around and finish these guys. Okay, so I went ahead and I hit these tree armatures with some of this Vallejo. It's like a brown kind of surface primer, just with the brush. And then I kind of this stuff is still drying a little bit. I'm gonna let that dry just a little bit, and then this is kind of like what I want that finished. You know, my finished colors to look like. And the highlights are going to get dulled down. Everything's going to get blended together when I do the washes on it. And then now I'm going to start doing some flocking. Alright, so I've got everything flocked how I want it, and then I kind of tried to like tie everything together. I got a little bit of flock on these guys, and then it kind of goes like this way as far as like being like lush and green, but I feel like I could use all of these together and they wouldn't look out of place at all. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fix everything to all of my little flock stuff and everything, and I'm going to do a coat to just kind of protect the dry brushing with the pigments. And what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some of this stuff, some of this fixative, and like you could just use hairspray. This is specifically for like charcoal and pastels and things like that. It's just to kind of protect like drawings and things like that when you're done with them, and you want to, when you're at that stage. This is a final fixative. There are workable fixatives where you can, go over the top of them. Like if you're doing a pencil drawing, this isn't that. So, so I'm just going to kind of go over these guys a little bit with some of this stuff, pretty lightly, just enough to kind of protect the, and then kind of like fix the flocking down and stuff. And I'm just going over it really lightly because I don't want to like melt all of my my dry brushing stuff. Get it all wet, and then undo all of my efforts, because if you get it too wet, it'll just kind of like run off the piece. But I just want to kind of fix everything to the base before I go over it with a coat of like a dull coat, like a lacquer. So next, before I you can see that this stuff, this matte, so-called matte final fixative stuff, is like kind of gloss. It's not like totally matte, but the dull coat the dull coat will actually it'll actually dull things down. But I'm gonna do just a little bit of dry brushing before I do some dull coat. I'm gonna use some Citadel, this is Deneb stone. So I'm just gonna make some extreme kind of highlights, just on like the very tops of things. Just do like a little touch of dry brushing, just to create those nice like kind of like focal point highlights. Pretty light. And I mean, you could do all this with dry brushing, you know, with paint, but I just like the way that the pigments look like stone, you know, like looks cool. Okay, so here's where we're at now. This is like where we're getting into like the fiddly stage where it's like, oh, it has to be, you know, just so. I mean, you could definitely call it done here. I did go ahead and I went around and took some little pieces of like kind of clump foliage stuff, and then like you can, this stuff is pretty, it looks like bush, you know, or bushes. You could make more realistic looking stuff, but this is supposed to be for, you know, for gaming. And then I just went ahead and super glued it onto the bases in some areas. So I'm just going to use a little bit of a medium CA glue. This is or cyanoacrylate glue. It's just super glue. But I'm going to start building some of the canopy of this stuff, and then I'm just going to like glue on some pieces like that, and then kind of build it up like gradually with this stuff. This is going to be like the dense canopy, and then I'm going to add some like leaves on top of that. But this is going to be like the sort of the foundation for that, and then we're going to kind of like build on top of that. And I am doing this before I do the layer of dull coat, because I'm gonna kind of use the dull coat to like glue everything in place as well. Like with the part where I was using the fixative stuff, you know, you could use, like, if you wanted to, you could make a kind of like a varnish, you know, like a thin varnish, and like use like an eyedropper and then drop it on top of, but it would kind of wash away all of those the dry brushing of the pigments, so we don't want that. It's just the fixative stuff. Like if you did this all with dry brushing, you could definitely do something like that, or you could just hit it with like a rattle can dull coat. If you are going to use a rattle can, I really recommend Tester's dull coat lacquer. I feel like it's like the best stuff for doing a dull coat. Like it actually does dull down the paint so that it's not quite so, if you use acrylic and it's pretty glossy. So I'm gonna go ahead and build some canopy on these guys before I move on to the next step. Like this stuff is like, it's like spongy, which is nice because when you put it on, like on the little armatures, it soaks up the super glue like a sponge. I mean, it is a sponge, basically. It's like a dyed kind of spongy material. I'm not sure exactly what this stuff is. I mean, it's got to be, I'm not sure. It doesn't like melt when you put super glue on it. So it's not a plastic. But yeah, like when I get to this point and I have these little clumps of stuff like this, I save that stuff, and I use this in the like I just make some kind of like a clump foliage mix of stuff, you know, and then use this for basing things. And it's got a little bit of the ultra fine stuff, it's got a little bit of the slightly clumpier stuff. And then you can also, you know, use it for like use it to base a mini. Like put down, you know, like if you look at these compared to the size of this mini, you know, like that's huge for, well, I mean, that's a good mini size, like right there, you know. Just like use like some little tweezers or something and then plop it down. Like put a little dot down, and then take a pair of tweezers and then just go like that. That was cool. Alright, so now that I've got my canopy kind of built, I'm gonna go over the tops of these guys. I have like a mix of some this is just like the what's left over. That's kind of like a mix of like super fine foliage, and then I've got some like leftover pieces of like clump foliage, like dark and light, and it's all just kind of mixed together. But I'm gonna kind of build out the canopy with this stuff, make it a little bit denser on top of these things. Or, you know, you could do it this way too. You take some like thin CA glue, and then you can see I'll try and get this so you can see the thin CA glue. It almost has like a water like consistency. That's what the thin refers to. And then I just take it in here and I kind of like roll it around in there, and then it soaks up that you get some highlights and some more like variation, so that it looks a little more realistic. It looks like a, you know, yeah, it looks more like an actual tree canopy, and it kind of fills it out a little bit too. Like you could do it that way, like for these guys, they make good little, oh, it's glued on there. They make good little shrubs. Oh, I'm gonna have to get it off. Okay. Well, that didn't go quite according to plan. But that's okay. Live and learn. Anyways, yeah. But it still looks like a nice little shrub. Like you could do that with, I think I put a little bit too much glue on there. Like you could do it with pieces like this, and that makes a nice little shrub, like a piece of scatter. Or so this, but this is how I like to do it with the trees. I'll put a little bit on like the top of the canopy, the top part, and then kind of let it soak in there a little bit, and then I'll just like dip it in there, kind of roll it around, and then you get a more kind of realistic looking canopy, like that one. Oops. Let's see if I can focus on that one. That one compared to like this one. You can see the difference. I'm trying to focus on it. But yeah, it won't glue to these guys if you already have it on the armature, but it also creates some little highlights on the tops, which look nice, instead of just being like having highlights all over, like with this guy. I mean, if you glue it down to a base, you're not going to see the part that's on the bottom, so it wouldn't matter. But so yeah, I'm going to go around and I'm going to just fill out these canopies a little bit like that. And then this is also going to make the these pieces a little bit stronger, kind of like pumping them full of CA glue, because the CA glue kind of like turns to plastic, and when it soaks in all of that stuff, it kind of like it hardens it, you know. But yeah, there we go. It also fills out that canopy a little more. Get more like leaf looking things on it. So another way that you can do highlights is, again, you know, with pigments. If you want to kind of break up create some little highlights on your bushes, just use some pigments and kind of dry brush them on the tops. And I mean, you could do the same thing with the tree canopy. You just kind of pop in some little highlights. Looking cool though. Getting there. So just to save some time, I'm gonna make a little makeshift spray booth. And I'm gonna hit these guys with some dull coat before I use any oils on them. Okay, so everything's all dry. It's the next day. You can see that, like, the even these, you know, the stuff isn't going anywhere. It's all sealed. The dull coat has dulled down some of the glossiness. You know, there's a few areas that are still a little glossy, but you could definitely call it done here. I mean, especially for like tabletop standard, you know, like it's meant to be used. These aren't like dioramas, but I mean, we're getting there. We're getting to like the diorama kind of point. And then you can see like the lights a little better. I was doing the last part at night, couldn't see but there's the canopy of these little trees with the extra flock on there to kind of fill them out. I think this one definitely looks the best out of all of them, out of all the trees. So now what I'm gonna do is for the last step, I'm gonna do an oil wash, and I'm gonna try a little experiment. So this is linseed oil. Linseed oil is it's the binder in oil paint. It's the thing that keeps the pigments together. This is what, you know, is the pigments are in oil paints are mixed in with linseed oil in there. So I'm gonna try and thin some oil paints out with a little bit of linseed oil and some solvent. I'm gonna use some Gamsol. This is it's an odorless mineral spirit. I just like gambling. I feel like their oil paints well, I do really like their paints. So I'm gonna make a mix of Gamsol, linseed oil, and my paints. So I'm gonna use a burnt umber, and a raw sienna, don't buy these paints. These paints are garbage. I've said it before, anytime I break these paints out in the video, don't buy Winton water mixable oil colors, because there's no such thing. Oil does not mix with water. I'm lying to you. But these are junk, and I'm just trying to use them up, and I'm using them on this. So, okay, I've got a burnt umber, raw sienna, and a olive green. Okay. Go ahead, buddy. So the reason why I'm putting in the linseed oil is because I kind of want to glaze this on a little bit more. The linseed oil is going to help to make a thinner glaze. Alright, that looks nice. Like I've got kind of like a creamy, like buttery kind of consistency. And this is pretty opaque. I'm going to thin this down a lot more. But got the kind of base colors, the right kind of runny, but still opaque. So first off, I'm going to start with my trees, and then I'm going to come in and take some of the kind of thicker oil paint and just go in there and kind of rub it in to get that texture. Pick up some of the texture because it'll sort of settle in the cracks. And you could do this with acrylics, you know, and dry brush it. I just think that this is easier, and I like the like non-glossiness, the way that the like oil paint, you can just kind of dab at it, you know, like take a paper towel or something and then just kind of dab away at the surface, and then you'll take it, you'll leave it in the cracks, but you'll take it off of the surface and you'll get that nice kind of dry brushy ink wash kind of look that's totally non-gloss for the last layer. So on the big guy, I'm going to use all of the colors. I'm going to use my brown, my burnt umber. I'm going to use that kind of in the shadows a little more, especially areas where it's like kind of like black, because I don't want it to be like black. If you paint it black, it looks like a cave, like a hole, like it's supposed to go into the wall. And then I'm going to use my raw sienna on some of the highlights to kind of tone down the highlights a little bit. And then I'm going to use the green, the olive green, to kind of get some like lichen kind of looking, like some kind of mossy looking areas. As well. Or you could use flock too. You could put little pieces of flock into the little cracks. That would look good too. But once this stuff settles and it, you know, it's like you can thin it down a lot more. More of like a super runny consistency like this too, and then it just kind of, it'll just run all over it and then run in the cracks and kind of settle in the cracks, and then you can really easily dab away your highlights and you'll get some really nice like definition in your rocks. Or you can kind of go a little bit thicker and you know, like paint in some little tone like lichen, you know, and things like that. Like places where green stuff would be growing. Again, I think oil paint is a really underrated medium. There's so much stuff that you can do with it. So one thing that's important to note at this stage if you do use oil paints is that you can't go back and do acrylics now. You can't do acrylic on top of oil paint because it'll crack and chip and stuff. Like I can go back in with like pigments, and I can do more like kind of dry brushing, like blending pigments with the oil paints on top of the you know, on this top layer. But or you can do like another coat of lacquer, but you can't do acrylic on top of oil. It's just one of those rules that the binder in oil paint, it repels the binder in acrylic, and it will crack if you try and paint acrylic on top of oil. So just, you know, use some more pigments or something, and like if you want to make some more highlights, but once you go oil, you can't go back. So anyways, we're all done. I threw in some little minis to kind of give some scale, and I'm gonna photograph this now for like the thumbnail and my Instagram, etc. But some of the areas are still a little bit gloss. You can tell it's just still drying, is all it is in those areas. But you're just gonna have to trust me that it does dry flat, non-gloss. So yeah, I threw on a couple little tufts of static grass too, just because I wanted to kind of break up some of the little bushes and make them look different. This is one way that you can it's a little problematic. This is one way you can photograph your stuff, take it outside, put it on a chair, and then fold up a piece of paper, and then you have a nice like a backdrop to take a picture, and you have good light. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Thanks for stopping by my channel, and I hope you feel inspired. Go out and make something.